Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start out by first saying thank you very much for coming to our session today. My name is Alexander Maxan. I'm the newly appointed research lead at the Huntington Society of Canada. Today, I'll be presenting a session on how we here at the Huntington Society of Canada support research efforts across the country. I'll be joined today by HSC's National Director of Family Services, Angèle Bénard, who will follow with some updates on non-clinical studies that support research. If at any point today during the presentation you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible at the end. To begin, I'd like to take a minute to talk a bit about myself and my background. I'm originally from New Brunswick. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in microbiology and immunology from Dalhousie in Nova Scotia. Then I went on to complete my master's and my PhD in neurobiology from Université Laval in Quebec City. And then after that, from 2020 to 2022, I worked at the University of Michigan in the United States, where I completed my postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Neurosurgery. I have been involved in Huntington's disease-related research for about the past 7 years, during which time I've published 7 research articles and reviews. I've also presented my numerous conferences around North America. Upon completing my postdoctoral fellowship just 2 months ago in September, I returned to Canada to begin my role as research lead here at HSC's head office. Now I'll take a couple minutes to talk about the responsibilities and my role at HSC. So what I'll be doing is overseeing our research portfolio, and this includes both the Navigator and the Clinical Fellowship Awards. These are used to support researchers and clinicians working on HD across the country. I will also be acting as a communicator directly to the HD community on all topics research related. This will include disseminating important information and updates from HD-related clinical trials and other significant research advancements. Along with Huntington's Disease Society of America, I assist in the organization of HD Co. This is our Coalition for Patient Engagement, and it is there to ensure that the voices and opinions of those affected by HD are adequately heard by the companies running drug trials. I will be acting as our staff liaison on the Research Council and the Clinical Neurology Council. I will also be networking with established researchers as well as young and up-and-coming scientists to ensure that we have continued pipeline of bright minds working to improve our understanding of HD here in Canada. By adding this role to the organization, we hope to show our commitment to building our research expertise and infrastructure in advance of our 50th anniversary. We hope this will allow us to support considerable growth in our research offerings for years to come. Now, over the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, I'll dive a little bit more into the specifics about my responsibilities and how each will allow us to do this. So, our mission at HSC is to improve the quality of life of those affected by Huntington disease. One of the ways that we address our mission is by investing in promising research through our research portfolio. In order to support academics across the country, we at HSC continue to invest in this promising research. Our Navigator Award has been providing funding opportunities to researchers since 2003. A few goals of our Navigator research program include funding Canadian scientific research of direct and immediate relevance to Huntington disease. We also want to provide a platform for the future recruitment of outstanding investigators in HD research. We want to facilitate research collaboration both nationally and internationally to make sure that all the top scientists are working together, sharing their bright ideas with each other. And lastly, we want to support research which is relevant to other neurodegenerative disorders as well as HD, so we can learn from other diseases as well. We are very proud of the recipients of our Navigator Award over the years and the contributions they have made to ongoing research efforts. Currently, our awards are supporting 3 research projects across the country, and we accept new applications every year. The first of the 3 current recipients of this research award is Dr. Blair Levitt, who is presenting an in-depth clinical trial update tomorrow that I encourage all of you to tune in for. Previously, the Levitt group has identified a change in a type of DNA modification called methylation that affects the activity of the Huntington gene in brain cells. They believe that changes in DNA methylation contribute to the loss of brain cells observed in HD. They hope to examine DNA from the brain cells of patients and the brains of unaffected individuals to identify patterns of HD-specific DNA methylation at the Huntington gene. The Huntington gene is examined because DNA methylation can alter gene expression and can change the amount of abnormal Huntington protein that is made. They are performing experiments that alter DNA methylation in models of the disease to reduce the amount of protein produced. If successful, this work will demonstrate that modulating DNA methylation may be a potentially powerful target for the development of new treatments for HD. Our second ongoing recipient of the award is Dr. Mahmoud Pouladi. Recent findings indicate that mutant huntingtin interferes with the work of oligodendrocytes, a type of brain cell that's responsible for aiding communication between different brain regions. Some studies have suggested that this hindrance of oligodendrocytes is partly to blame for the clinical symptoms that develop in patients with HD. The objective of this research project is to investigate the ways in which oligodendrocytes are affected by the HD mutation and the mutant huntingtin protein it encodes, and then to develop possible ways to treat them. These studies could also lead to new ideas on how to treat HD. Dr. Pouladi will be a part of our panel in our Ask the Scientist presentation tomorrow, so if you are interested in hearing more about his research, be sure to come by that session as well. Lastly, we are also very proud to support Dr. Cheryl Erosmith as our most recent recipient of the award. Their lab has been able to show that the Huntingtin protein interacts with a certain type of genetic material called RNA quite directly. They aim to identify the pathways by which Huntingtin interacts with specific RNAs and then to characterize them using a variety of biochemical and cellular methods. They have used cutting-edge microscopes to visualize Huntingtin protein at extremely high resolutions, and then to build work on what we now know and can visualize as Huntingtin protein interacts with specific RNAs. The results will provide insight into how both normal and mutant Huntingtin proteins interact with RNA in cells and can regulate key processes involved in health and HD-mediated death of neural cells. If they can understand how these interactions occur, then we can use this information to develop strategies to avoid or even rescue the effects of human Huntingtin for potential treatments. Another opportunity we are pleased to announce is the continuation of a long-term program intended to train a new generation of neurologists with expertise in treating Huntington's disease in Canada. This fellowship provides the opportunity for post-residency training of 1 year. Clinical fellowships are an opportunity for physicians to obtain advanced training in order to acquire more specialized experience, and it can complement their residency training. Clinical fellows must be recognized specialists or family physicians, and their training may involve both clinical and research activities. This program, which began July 1st, 2022, will run for 5 consecutive years, and our goal over these 5 years is to add 5 new Huntington disease neurologists in Canada. This clinical fellowship award was made possible via a donation by Dr. Mark Gutman and his wife, Leslie Simpson. Dr. Gutman, who retired at the end of August 2021, is one of the leading neurologists in the country specializing in Huntington disease, both in research and clinical aspects. There is currently a shortage of neurologists in Canada trained to manage HD patients and their families, and without a dedicated initiative to stimulate interest in the field of HD, the shortages of neurologists with expertise will only continue to worsen, and thanks to Dr. Gutman, we are hoping to help fill this gap by creating the program. This year, we were happy to announce our first recipient, Dr. Gabriel Amarelli from the University of Calgary. Dr. Amarelli is currently continuing their clinical fellowship in movement disorders as they have been since 2021. During their first year, Dr. Amarelli got in touch with HD research projects. Their program is currently participating in clinical trials you might have heard of, such as Proof HD and Enroll HD. Dr. Amarelli has told us that they consider themselves very fortunate to train in a center that plays such an active part in the work towards improving HD patients' and families' quality of life. We have recently sent out information for our 2023 campaign and are currently accepting applications and look forward to networking with as many prospective residents as possible so that we can continue to attract the top neurologists such as Dr. Amarelli to come work on HD care here in Canada. Recently, we put forth recommendations regarding potential research funding opportunities that could become part of our 50th anniversary campaign. One of the final recommendations was funding a position we truly believe is a really big deal and worth repeating, an HSC endowed research chair position. So you've probably heard this mentioned a couple of times today, and maybe you might be wondering what exactly that is. No, it is not a chair that a scientist sits on while performing research. It is a set funding for a professor at a university. This particular role is built for a top professor and researcher. Using an established fund, matched dollar for dollar by Western University, we will enable a national or even international leader in neurodegenerative research to focus on finding new ways to understand, prevent, identify, and treat Huntington disease. The chair recipient will be a national or an international leader in neurodegenerative research, but their particular focus will be on Huntington disease. Each year, this endowment will generate income in support of the chair. Funds will be available to support salary or benefits, or even research, or some sort of mix thereof. We really look forward to having this program get started and can't wait to see the implications it has on research in HD across Canada. It is a great opportunity for us to bring in more top talent into the field. The universal goal of International HD is to focus on finding treatments that can reverse, slow, or prevent the progression of the disease. Canada's strategic research funding has helped to develop a critical mass of expertise across the country that also allows us to support clinical trials. While we here at HSC do not play a direct role in clinical trials, there are a number of ways that we support them and our community. So clinical trials differ from research performed at academic institutions in laboratories, as they are research that is performed in people. The goal is for researchers to find out if a new treatment will be effective and safe in human patients. Clinical trials depend largely on the participation of individuals and families affected by HD. HSC plays a key role in bridging the relationship between the researchers and individuals by educating Canadians on the importance of the clinical trial process, how they can get involved, and why their participation is crucial. Clinical trial testing, potential treatment options are commonly classified into different phases. The drug development process will normally proceed through all of the phases over many years. And for a treatment to successfully pass through the phases, such as 1, 2, and 3, which test for safety, tolerability, and efficacy, while steadily increasing the number of participants and the duration as the phase advances, it will then usually be approved by a national regulatory authority for use in the general population. Phase 4 trials are the post-marketing or surveillance studies that are conducted to monitor the safety over the next few years. There are several HD clinical studies and observational studies going on across the country right now, with even more expected to enter this space over the next few years. I don't want to step too much on the toes of Dr. Levitt's clinical trial roundup tomorrow, so if you have any questions about specific trials, please keep them until then. But whether you're in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, or British Columbia, know that our goal at HSC is to continue to develop the relationship with the companies developing treatment options, the researchers, and the clinics to get as many available options as possible to the community. Through our collaboration with all of them, we hope to learn more about HD and how the drugs currently being tested affect patients. We aim to continue to build a strong foundation for these trials across the country and to work alongside our community to find the answers you've been waiting for. Information on all of these clinical trials, including specific locations of trial sites, can all be found on our website. Now, I would like to take a minute to discuss our organization's role in patient engagement at the initial stages of trial development so that we can ensure that companies developing these therapeutics being tested know what is important to the community. The Huntington Disease Coalition for Patient Engagement, or HD-COPE, is a globally recognized program organized by leading HD patient advocacy organizations who have united to give families affected by Huntington disease a direct voice in clinical research. HD COPE was launched in 2018, and its two managing partners are the Huntington Disease Society of America and the Huntington Society of Canada. The purpose of HD COPE is to add quality to all aspects of the clinical trial process through worldwide representation and input from persons living at risk or with HD, their family members, care partners, and the youth. HD COPE seeks to provide a coordinated and knowledgeable mechanism to contribute to global HD community experience, to regulators, to industry, and researchers when needed. We feel that this patient-oriented input is essential to meet the needs of the patient community, to speed up their recruitment, and to decrease the dropout rate of clinical trials. At a time when clinical research is being challenged to include such a patient perspective, HD COPE provides comprehensive support and access to the community to ensure that the experience of living with HD is an established part of the clinical research process rather than just an ad hoc activity. Typically, operating staff at HD COPE, such as myself, are approached by companies in the early stages of developing a therapy for HD in order to partner in various ways. This could be supporting community education around research concepts, could be event sponsorship, or raising awareness of upcoming clinical trials. In fostering these relationships, we raise awareness of HD COPE and suggest ways to incorporate the team's input into education, awareness, and trial design. The industry might request engagements that could be either broad or specific. The purpose of recruiting a trained global HD COPE team is to be able to meet these needs responsibly and efficiently so that we can speed up the process of drug development. For example, a company might request worldwide input from caregivers with HD COPE on a new tool to measure cognitive changes in individuals with HD. Or they might wish to speak with 8 gene-positive individuals from North America about a surgical procedure they are considering for a future clinical trial. Operating staff at HDSA and HSC will then work with the industry representatives to develop an HD COPE forum based on their specific needs. We'll communicate the appropriate participants, arrange for the signature of non-disclosure agreements when necessary, schedule the advisory board and any activities, and then do all the organizing of the reporting. Our coalition is made up of volunteer participants from the community. These volunteers will serve as advisors and can hail from any country. They may be a person with HD, a person at risk for HD, a carer, or even a member of an affected family. If this is a role that might interest you or someone you know, I would love to hear from you. My email will be shared at the end of this presentation so that you can reach out privately. It is important to know that participants must be able to speak English and be willing to listen and constructively communicate their personal views to a mixed group of patients, carers, health professionals, advocates, and research. They must have a basic understanding of research, which will be supplemented by yearly training provided by us, and they must be able to attest to their ability to maintain confidentiality. Thank you very much for listening while I introduced myself and talked about my role at the organization. I will now pass the virtual microphone over to my colleague Angèle, who will discuss other studies the HSC has supported to learn about how our family services arm of the organization can support the community.
Thank you, Alexander. And hello, everyone. I'm pleased to share with you how research and family services cross over and the importance of both focuses here at HSC. HSC has a long history in providing both supports and education and advocacy for individuals and families affected by HD. Today, I plan to share with you a few projects that have had an impact on our services and planning for the future. To start, I'll introduce myself. I've been a social worker for over 20 years, and I'm currently completing a master's degree in social work. Since 2008, I've been part of the team here at HSC, providing support, education to individuals and families affected by HD across Northern Ontario. I was also part of the team that developed the youth and young adult mentorship program. Then in 2015, I took on the role of the National Director of Family Services, leading HSC's Family Services team and representing HSC on research collaborations with industry partners. I am passionate about education and creating safer spaces so we can all have our voices heard. And so, as Alexander shared, HSC funds research in various ways. And as we know, HD affects the person in many ways. It will impact their physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities. But HD also affects many other aspects of a person or a family's life. It could affect them spiritually in finding some sense of meaning and purpose. It could affect them socially, either with friendships and relationship with neighbors and their community. And it could also affect families and individuals financially, influencing their work, relationship with co-workers, and where they live. And so in light of this, we at HSC wanted to ensure that we have a good understanding of how HD affects people's lives across Canada. We also strive to better understand how the healthcare and social service systems support them, or maybe not, as they face the changes and challenges brought on by HD. So over the next few slides, I will share how HSC is looking to broaden our research scope so we can ensure we can focus on the larger picture of how HD affects individuals and families, and it allows us to collaborate with other research groups that have common priorities and interests. So HSC is including different types of research, such as quantitative and qualitative studies. So why would this be important? So in considering these two main types of research, we can better understand the types of questions that are being asked. Quantitative and qualitative research may be the two main, but we'll also see a mix of both of these projects. So I wanted to share with you some of the few elements of many that help us distinguish between the two types of research. So by starting at looking at the goals of each type of research, in quantitative research, we're looking to explain or find the cause of something. When we consider qualitative research, we're seeking to build a better understanding of something, a phenomena, either the human behavior or a cultural or even a social organization. And often it's focused on finding a meaning. So how do people make sense of their lives or experiences? And what is their understanding of the world? But it may also be descriptive. So the research may describe a complex phenomena such as social dynamics. If we're looking at the research questions, the quantitative research aims to be more conclusive and pertains to a larger population and answers questions such as what, when, or where. So what gene carries the HD mutation, or when does HD symptoms appear, or where in the brain should we target treatment? Whereas qualitative research is often used to explore questions such as how or why. So how does living at risk of HD affect youth and young adults? Or why would someone choose to reach out to HSC or an HD clinic? And so the last component I wanted to compare between the two types of research would be the types of results we're hoping to get. So with quantitative research, we would be looking at a goal of predicting or generalizing the results or finding a cause. Whereas with qualitative research, the goal of that type of research would be to better understand the participants' own perspectives as it's embedded in their social context, in the world around them. And really not something that we can generalize over large groups of people, but really gaining a better sense of that meaning for those individuals that have been part of the research project. As I mentioned earlier, some studies may use a mix of both of these. So they may bring out the valuable knowledge and understanding of HD and how it affects the individual, the family, and the systems in our community that would help these families and individuals, how we can better support them. So with that knowledge, I'd like to share some of the research projects that have helped us get a bit of a peek into people's lives and better understand their lived experience with HD. I'll be giving a very high-level summary of each of these projects that HSC has collaborated on, and you will see the links for the published articles where they're available, if you would like to look at them a little bit more closely. So here we go. I'll start with the first of the studies that we helped collaborate on. So the first one is called the HD Humanistic Journey, and this was a collaboration that we did with Roche back in 2020 and 2021. And in this research project, we looked at input from a small group of people, and really there was representation though from every province across the country. So people were invited to participate, and interviews were then set up. And then the people that participated had the option to complete a web-based journal if they wanted to. And participants really shared how HD affects their daily life and really looking across the disease progression. So the project included people that were living at risk for HD, those that knew that they had the gene mutation, and those who were symptomatic, as well as their carers. And these were individuals that were looking at their day-to-day life with HD, and for some it was looking back at their experience because their person with HD may have passed on, and so they were no longer active caregivers, but they still wanted to share their experience. And so we were able to get input from folks at different stages of the disease and at different points in the disease. And so really, as this research project really focused from an anthropology lens, we put the person in the middle of their environment and of their experience. And so the objectives that we had set out were to gain a deeper understanding of the HD journey and to hopefully identify key unmet needs from the individual's perspective and that of their care partners. And so through this research study, we were able to listen a little bit better to the community members who shared their stories, and it allowed us to better understand who the main supports were, where some of the gaps were. And from the various individuals in the community with the various stages of the disease, we were able to also look at what were some of the things that as an organization we may be doing well, but what are some of the things that we could be doing better? And then when would be better times to offer certain services, or where a service is needed and may not exist yet. And so as we were communicating these pieces with the community, how well are we communicating our services? So by listening to these community members, as well as some of the challenges and as some of the benefits of being connected to the HD community, we can then improve the care and support that we offer. It really reinforced for us the importance of social awareness of HD. It really looked at increasing our educational resources and enhancing the supports that we offer at HSC. So now I'd like to move on to another piece of research that includes both the individual and family voices once again. This one is the supporting trial participation in people with Huntington gene. It was a patient-centered, theory-guided survey of barriers and enablers. And this research project was a collaboration with Clinical Trials Ontario, the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, the University of Ottawa Brain and Mind Research Institute, and the Ottawa Hospital. And like I mentioned earlier, I'll just provide you with a very high-level summary of this project, but you can find the complete publication online at the link you see on the screen. And so this project was actually initiated back in 2018 as we started to see a significant increase in the number of clinical trials in the HD landscape. And when we look at the broader clinical trial field, there's often an issue in other diseases with under-recruitment, and this leads to wasted resources and wasted opportunity costs. So we wanted to see if there was a way in our HD community to avoid wasting these opportunities. And so looking at methods for designing a trial participation strategies, we use this framework through this research study, looking at behavior change theory. And this hasn't been used very often, so this was kind of a novel approach to this study. And so this particular project was informed by the theoretical domains framework. So how we did this research project basically was we had a range of trial participation, which were identified as either barriers or enablers to participate in clinical trials. And these were taken from interviews that were done with community members. And then we took that input from the community members and set up a survey that was then sent out to the wider HD community. And so our HD community members came back and answered those surveys for us. And we were able to rate the extent as to which some of those barriers or enablers they felt were part of their experience if they were to participate in a clinical trial. So this study, I just want to clarify that this study wasn't focused on one particular trial, but we were just trying to get a sense from the community what they think are some of the perceived barriers or maybe enablers to participating in a clinical trial should one become available to them. So we had about 243 completed surveys that came back for analysis. And what we found through this research project were actually quite a list of the barriers and enablers. Now you see on your screen, I've only put the top 4 barriers and top 4 enablers that were identified by the community. We actually were able to identify 32 factors that would be either barriers or enablers. And so the community, the respondents endorsed 9 barriers and 23 enablers that were relevant to trial participation. And so, as I mentioned earlier, if you'd like the full list, they are available at the link that I had earlier, but they're also available on our HSC website. And so the top 4 barriers as they were identified in this study, we're really looking at the travel to the study site. We're looking at worry about unknown side effects, the trial documents being too complex or too difficult to understand, and then the participation in the clinical trial affecting other activities. It could be their parental role, it could be their caregiving role, it could be their employment. And so trying to figure out how those pieces would impact other activities in their life. The enablers that people identified as the top 4 were really looking at optimism about the likelihood that trial participation could lead to a potential cure. People were also feeling good about helping others or contributing to science. And really another piece that came through was how helpful people were available to help with the participation decision. And so people appreciated having that support there when they were making that decision whether or not to be part of a clinical trial. And so, as I mentioned, this one is available online and will also be published in the Journal for HD. It soon, actually, it hasn't been published yet, but it will be soon. And so, moving on to the other pieces of research that HSC has participated in, there's 2 more projects that I'd like to cover because they're more at the community level perspective. One is actually still in process, and the other one has also been published. So I'll start with the one that is completed and published. And this one was a collaboration with Roche and HD clinicians from across the country. And so as clinical trials progress, we are looking at the healthcare system to better understand what resources are currently available and what gaps exist should a disease-modifying treatment such as intrathecal treatment become available. And so in this study, the group reached out to all HD clinics and neurologists known to provide supports to individuals and families affected by HD. And the social workers were also contacted, whether it was the social workers working within the HD clinics with HSC and HSQ. And so surveys were sent out to them as well. So I just want to clarify that this study was measuring the healthcare capacity in relation to an intrathecal treatment for a disease-modifying treatment. And so it wasn't capacity with the individual, it was the healthcare system capacity. And this publication is actually available online through the British Medical Journal Open. You'll see the link there is on the screen. So the objectives of this study was actually done over the last few months of 2020 and in early 2021. So there were online surveys and semi-structured interviews that were done with neurologists from Canadian HD clinics, as well as within community centers. The social workers, as I mentioned, were invited to complete online surveys assessing current HD management and the potential capacity to support the administration of an intrathecal disease-modifying treatment. So through the analysis of the survey responses, the anticipated requests for service and the need for resources were modeled. And really, what did this tell us? It means that we got a sense as to the percentage of community members we currently see at the clinics and what would be needed should a disease-modifying treatment become available. There was also resource bottlenecks that were identified. And then also they looked at developing models as to what percentage of or incremental support needs would be needed to be able to meet the needs of our community. So basically the results were pretty clear. Our current systems of HD care have little to no capacity to support new intrathecal disease-modifying treatments. So we understand that we're currently supporting a fraction of our community within the clinic setting, and we need to start planning now to ensure that we have the people and the resources in place when a disease-modifying treatment becomes available. So how are we using this knowledge at HSC? So what we've been doing is we've been looking at expanding our research and family services portfolio. You've heard Alexander speak to the Endowed HD Research Chair, the fellowship program, and our Navigator Awards. You have also heard Shelley Redmond speak to HSC's proposed new Centers for HD Care, the Clinical and Research Excellence, which we're launching with our 50th anniversary. So HSC aims to expand the care options and services offered to our families through these centers. So stay tuned for more information as it becomes available. So one more study I wanted to share with you today, and it's currently looking for participants. So this is the predictive testing study, and this is a collaboration with Dr. Levitt at UBC. And this is an ongoing survey that aims to help decision makers and healthcare providers, such as clinicians, genetic counselors, and HSC, to better prepare for potential surge in predictive testing requests. So ultimately, what we hope to achieve is improved quality of care for all individuals and families coming forward from the HD community. And so HSC is supporting UBC study to help us better understand the effects of clinical trial results on the decision to access predictive testing or not. And so if you're a person living at risk for HD gene mutation, if you have recently undergone predictive testing, or if you have chosen to postpone the process, you're invited to participate in this research study. If you choose to participate, you will be asked a few questions about your experience in making the decision to access predictive testing or not. You can find the link to this study on your screen, and you can also visit the HSC website, and you will find it under the Research tab. We'll be happy to share the results when the study is complete. And so where do we go from here? HSC's participated in different collaborations. We have different research projects going. Family Services is also getting involved. We want you to know that we value the time and information that is shared by the individuals and families within the HD community. And as we send out these opportunities to participate in various studies, we appreciate you considering them. With that information, we review our current services offerings, and we strive to expand HSC supports to the community and in research. You can check out HSC support group booth here at the virtual conference to see all of the offerings available online. And please feel free to connect with your regional HSC Resource Center Director or social worker to see what is also being offered in person in your area. On the HSC website, you can also explore other family services, such as the Youth and Young Adult Mentorship Program, our educational sessions, and our HD educational material. As Alexander mentioned at the beginning of our session, HSC is growing our research portfolio to include the HD Research Chair, the Neurology Fellowship, and Navigator Awards. As I shared, HSC continues to consider the current community and clinical supports for families and individuals affected by HD. As we learn more about our strengths and the gaps, we will continue to develop new ways of supporting the HD community here in Canada. And we look forward to celebrating the exciting new opportunities during our 50th anniversary celebration and to bridge the gaps between the needs of families and the research community. We will continue to grow our knowledge and understanding of HD, how it impacts individuals and families and our community. We can as such continue to grow hope, and we can continue our vision towards a world free from Huntington disease. So at this point, I would like to thank you all for your attention and would welcome your questions.
Thank you much for sharing the results of the studies with us, Angel. I look forward to seeing where we will go from here. As you mentioned, I'd like to open it up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. I'll be able to pull some up and ask. So, Angel, I will ask you, how does HSC share various research opportunities with the HD community?
So as we receive invitations or we work on different collaborations for research projects that involve community input, we will reach out to the community either through our website, or we will sometimes send out an e-blast, either nationally if it's a national project, or provincially or regionally if it's a very specific region. We will also add that information on our social media posts. And so people will see those invites coming up either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And folks can also connect with their regional resource center directors. They also have information about these projects and will share them with their communities.
And where can I find more information on the published articles, the results of all these studies that we have ongoing?
So the studies can actually be found on our HSC website. If folks go to the research tab under the recent news option, that's where we actually have some of the links for the published articles of HSC research projects and collaborations.
And you mentioned earlier about HSC resource center directors or social workers. If I was living in an area, how would I be able to find mine?
Well, you can, again, visit the HSC website. We actually have an About Us tab at the top, and there people can choose the Family Services program, and there's a Family Services list, and all the social workers are listed according to province and region, and folks can find their email addresses and their phone numbers there. Folks can also call our national office and ask for the social worker in their area, and folks will be able to connect with them through that number as well. They have 1-800-998-7398.
Good, thank you.
No problem. Actually, Alexander, I have a couple of questions I see are for you.
Okay.
So when we're looking at HSC awards, how do you decide on the recipients of these awards?
Oh, okay. So we spend months accepting applications from researchers around the country. It'll start with myself sending out information packages to anybody on our mailing list, anybody who wants to be included. And then we have many, many brilliant scientists who will send us applications throughout the year. On top of that, we have a panel of scientists that you'll hear talking more throughout the weekend, and they volunteer their time to act on our research and our clinical neurology councils. And these councils will lend their expertise in deciding which applications will be selected to receive the awards.
Thank you. And what is the difference between clinical trials and observational studies?
So I did mention the two. In many studies, the investigator, who we often refer to as either a researcher or a primary investigator, or more commonly a PI, they don't do any experiments or test new treatments on the individual with the disorder they are investigating in observational studies. Instead, they will observe them or maybe do some standardized assessments. And this observation or assessment will help the investigator understand the disorder, maybe better describe the condition, and understand the most impacted areas of that condition. In clinical trials, on the other hand, the investigator will test new ways to prevent, detect, or treat a disorder. Treatments might include investigating new drugs, novel or previously approved for other therapies, possibly a combination of drugs, maybe new devices, or even new approaches to use existing treatments. Clinical trials can also evaluate other aspects of patient care, such as techniques to improve symptoms or quality of life. A well-designed clinical trial is pretty much our gold standard to prove that any treatment or a new medical approach will actually work and they're usually conducted in the 4 phases. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this session. I'm excited to announce that we have a few more awards to present in recognition of the amazing contributions people make in our community. I'm sure you'll agree that the recipients are more than worthy of our attention. Then afterwards at 5:15 Eastern, it will be time for some very gentle chair yoga with Toronto chapter president Natalie Marnica. And this will be suitable for all, or you can visit our social tables. That will all be all for tonight until tomorrow's program, which will start at 12:30 Eastern with a slideshow showing highlights of our community's achievements over the past year. So feel free to bring your lunch or your breakfast and a coffee while we celebrate our community and enjoy the music of Eli and the Straw Man. Then programming itself will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern. Enjoy.